Good afternoon. It's Mrs. Fry from John Marshall High School. At the end of yesterday's video, there were 4 homework problems. I was planning on going over those first for today's video, but nobody texted me their answers, so I'm going to hold off on that. Maybe I should have put a due date on those homework answers. So within 24 hours of me posting this video, I want you guys to text me back the answers for your homework using the Remind app. If you haven't signed up for the Remind yet, my class code is at Mrs. Fry A. Now, to start out today, we're going to learn about multi-step equations. These equations could have variables on both sides, or they could also include parentheses. So let's get started. The first problem, you can see there's an x on both sides of the equal sign, which makes this a multi-step equation. I always want to start out by subtracting or even adding this variable on both sides. Remember, the variable is just the letter. Okay, so I always go to the smaller number that has a variable with it. So in this case, that would be 7x, because I have 8x and 7x. Okay, so I'm just going to subtract 7x on both sides. So put minus 7x right underneath of 7x, and then minus 7x right underneath of 8x. Okay, so we want to line those up. The reason we do this is because 7x minus 7x is 0. 8x minus 7x is 1x, but we don't need to put the 1, so just put x. Carry down the minus 2, and that equals negative 9. The next thing you need to do for this problem would just be to add 2 on both sides. So put plus 2, plus 2, because negative 2 plus 2 is 0. We always want to make that cancel. So x equals negative 9 plus 2, which is negative 7. And that's the final answer for this problem, negative 7. The second example I have prepared has only one variable, but it's on the right-hand side of the equation, which we're not used to. And I also notice on the right-hand side of the equation that I have 2 different numbers, 1 and 5. So the first thing you want to do is combine like terms. You've probably heard of that before. Combine like terms. Okay, so that means I'm just going to take the 1 and the 5 and add those together. That's why I underlined them. So this is just 6 equals 1 plus 5, which is 6, and then don't forget the minus 2n. That negative sign goes with the 2n, so it's minus 2n. Then the next thing you want to do is subtract 6 on both sides. Remember, when you're solving an equation, you're trying to get the variable all by itself, so we want to undo whatever is being done to that variable. Okay, so 6 minus 6 is 0, so that cancels, carry down this negative 2n, and that's going to equal 6 minus 6 on the other side as well. So that's 0. I actually need to write down the 0 on this side. So then when I divide both sides by negative 2, I can see 0 divided by negative 2 is just 0. So 0 equals n. Sometimes that happens. Sometimes the answer is 0. Now, the next type of problem I have prepared is using the distributive property. The distributive property is used whenever there's parentheses involved in the equation. Whenever I need to distribute, I like to draw arrows from the number that's in front of the parentheses to the numbers that I'm multiplying inside of the parentheses. So that's negative 4 times negative 6x, and then negative 4 times negative 3. Negative 4 times negative 6x would be positive 24x. Then negative 4 times negative 3, that's positive 12. Remember, a negative times a negative is a positive, and that's going to equal 12. Now, the rest is just a 2-step equation. Remember, we're solving for x. We're trying to get the variable completely by itself. So subtract 12 on both sides. Make sure you're lining up the 12s underneath of the 12s. So 12 minus 12 is 0. So carry down this 24x. And that equals 12 minus 12 again, which is also 0. This time I need to write down the 0. That way I have something to divide by, I don't know why I did that. So divide both sides by 24. 0 divided by 24 is 0, so x equals 0. And the last problem for today's video, it's a big one. I've got variables on both sides and parentheses in which we'll have to use the distributive property. So anytime I have to use the distributive property, I like to draw arrows. I like to draw the arrow from the number outside the parentheses to whatever's inside the parentheses. So negative 8 times 5n, and then negative 8 times 6. That makes this negative 40n, and then negative 8 times 6 would be minus 48, equals 3n minus 5. Okay, so this one looks pretty tough. The numbers are kind of big, but I think we can handle it. The next thing I like to do is I like to go straight to the smaller number with the variable. So if I have a negative 40n and a 3n. Technically negative 40 is the smaller number, but I'm just looking to get all of the variables on the same side. So I'm just going to subtract 3n on both sides. This is going to be my preferred method. It wouldn't be wrong if you add 40 on both sides, but I just think it's going to be easier to subtract 3n on both sides because that'll keep all of my n's on the left-hand side. So 3n minus 3n is 0. That cancels. Negative 40n minus 3n. Both of those numbers are negative, which means we should add them together and keep the negative sign. So this is negative 43n. Carry down the minus 48, and that equals negative 5. Then add 48 to both sides. Oops. Sometimes this iPad has a mind of its own. Okay, adding 48 to both sides. Negative 48 plus 48 cancels. Carry down the negative 43n, and that's going to equal negative 5 plus 48. Think of it this way, 48 minus 5, which is 43. Then the last thing you're going to do is divide both sides by negative 43. Okay, so the negative 43s will cancel out, which means n equals 43 divided by negative 43, which is negative 1. Okay, so that's it. The answer is negative 1. Thank you, buddy. Okay, so now here is your homework for today.
What are you doing?
Just 2 problems. The first problem has variables on the both sides, and the second problem has the distributive property as well as variables on both sides. My contact information is at the bottom here. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to send me an email and text me on Remind when you get your answers. Remember, you have 24 hours from the time that this video has posted. I hope you guys are having a great day. Bye.